I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you'll see an ad or you'll see a posting on LinkedIn or whatever it happens to be specifically, and you just feel like it was made for you. You feel like whomever wrote it made it with you in mind.
Okay.
And that's how I felt when I randomly found this Craigslist ad. It was to go to Singapore to build the program at the first indoor cycling studio in Southeast Asia.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Friday Society podcast. This is the podcast for anybody and everybody in the health and wellness industry that wants to grow their business. I'm your host, Alexa Cawley. I'm the CEO and president of Forever Friday Consulting, where I work with private clients one-on-one to help them scale their brands and reach amazing people. On this podcast, we talk to industry leaders and experts that have built really amazing brands within the health and wellness industry to teach you how to do the exact same thing. I've worked for some of the biggest names in the health and wellness field, like Lululemon and SoulCycle, and I take everything that I've learned, plus our industry's amazing experts, and bring it to you. All right, guys, let's get into the episode. It is a really good one, so drop me a line on Instagram at foreverfriday.co, and let's get to it. I mean, honestly, are you ready to just jump right in?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, guys, I am here with Noel Nocciolo. Right? Am I saying it right?
Nocciolo. You're very close.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm so excited you're here. We have been talking for the last 25 minutes about Italian history and lineage and all this stuff. So we are not strangers to being on this Zoom right now, but for everyone listening, we are. So Noel, can you introduce yourself and where in the world you are right now and where in the world your career has taken you over the last 5-10 years or so?
Yes. So my name obviously is Noel Nocciolo, although anglicized is Nocciolo, but I'm embracing Nocciolo. I am currently right now in Italy, where I have moved temporarily, and more on that in the coming months, because you and I are filming this right before Thanksgiving 2022. Mm-hmm. I am from California, but I moved to New York City when I was 17 years old to go to Fordham University at Lincoln Center. I was a theater major and involved in theater and dance and vocal music and the music industry and all of that. And I got dragged to my first indoor cycling class at the original Rear Lobby SoulCycle by a colleague in 2008.
Amazing.
And that was what changed everything for me, because I grew up in dance class and was always, very theatrical. I'm an only child, always in performance mode. But I was raised by two kinesiology majors from UCLA who played team sports. My dad played baseball for UCLA, and my mom and he met while coaching in Southern California at Calabasas High School, funnily enough, home of the Kardashians, which is how people know it now. This is pre-Kardashian. But anyway, I never was a gym person. So for me to go to a class, it always made more sense to me than going to a gym and doing free weights. Mm-hmm. So when my colleague had drugged me, she tried to get me there for a year. We worked around the corner at Alice's Teacup on the Upper West.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's been like this very funny pipeline of Alice's Teacup to old SoulCycle, like back in the day SoulCycle.
I remember you told me that with Miles too, right?
Yes, Miles. That's how Miles got there as well. Yes. So she had tried to get me to come take a class on a bike for a year. And I was like, I don't ride bikes. What's that? I don't do that. And she just finally said, you need to get over it and just come take this class. Mm-hmm. And so I did. And it completely changed my life, the trajectory of my life. Working out was fun again. There was a connection with music and energy and community and all of the things that the original iteration of SoulCycle was prior to all of the expansion. And it just changed everything. So I started taking class 3 times a week, usually, for probably 2007, 2008 till 2011, when I auditioned and did the teacher training program, finished that, got to the end of it. And the worst thing happened to me. I was the only person in my batch not to get a job.
Wow. And you were training group 2, right?
Not 2. I don't remember it. Yeah. Somewhere between 4 and 9, I'm going to say. This was 2011. This was actually during the Equinox acquisition, which proved to be a very interesting time to be around SoulCycle.
Yeah.
But I got to the end of that experience and I was the only person in my group not to get a job, which was devastating, of course, because at the time the training was 9 months long. Mm-hmm. And now, of course, it's much shorter. And I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. You know, my group was way too long, but 6 weeks is probably a little too short. Right.
Yeah.
And I decided I wasn't going to let it stop me. So I started asking myself why certain things that we were doing on the bike made my back hurt, made my knees hurt. I wasn't even 30 at the time. So I felt like I was way too young to be feeling so janky in my body. And those led to bigger conversations, which I had answered from taking the Schwinn certification, which was also a life changer, with Rachel Vazzarali, who was amazing. And I just started teaching, 15 to 20 classes a week, like a madwoman all over town. Anyone that would have me, I started teaching. I taught at City College in their intramural gym sports area. I taught at Crunch. I taught at Asphalt Green. I taught everywhere. And it was awesome, Alexa, in the regard that it was low pressure.
Yeah.
I didn't have somebody thinking that my class wasn't worth $38 or $34 or whatever it was at the time. I had an opportunity to really be the person that I wanted to be on the bike and develop my own personality on the bike and step back and take things out of class and put things in and look at music in the way that I always had loved looking at music.
Yeah.
And basically that hustle of teaching full time in New York at low pressure gyms was incredible. And I answered a Craigslist ad in January of 2014. I promise this is true.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you'll see an ad or you'll see a posting on LinkedIn or whatever it happens to be specifically, and you just feel like it was made for you. You feel like whomever wrote it made it with you in mind.
Okay.
And that's how I felt when I randomly found this Craigslist ad. It was to go to Singapore to build the program at the first indoor cycling studio in Southeast Asia.
Oh my God.
And my first thought was, oh, Singapore, that's cool. That's like Asia for beginners. English is the official language. It's, that'll be awesome. And I started having, Skype conversations, email conversations. We probably exchanged about 20 emails, a Skype call. My friend, who's an attorney who also used to teach at SLT in New York City, she lawyered my first contract.
Wow.
And they sent me a deposit via PayPal and a Singapore Airlines plane ticket, and I subletted my apartment and I went. And really from the moment I touched down, I thought, I have no idea if I'm going to be any good at this.
Yeah.
Right.
Were you not worried about anything else?
No,
what am I getting into? Is this thing?
No, it felt so right. I moved to New York City when I was 17 and I'm an only child and I've just always sort of just gone for it.
Yeah.
But the thing that I had no idea, quite frankly, about is there's a very big difference between teaching a good class or an extraordinary class or even a passable class and training instructors to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And building a program, writing a manual. I had an Olympian in my first teacher training.
Wow.
That's nuts. Right. Wow. So how was I going to localize everything that I'd learned both from SoulCycle and the intangibles and the music and the hospitality, synthesized with my first jobs out of college, which were working in food and beverage in New York City. I worked for Chef Jean-Georges in his corporate office. I worked for, buddies from Bay Ridge that decided to open a bar in Brooklyn. I mean, my F&B life was also a big part of the consulting that I now do because everything's hospitality.
Yeah.
So I had that. And then how to ride a bike properly from Schwinn and how to teach classes that both had choreography in them as well as metrics. So how was I going to do all of that? And it was insane in the regard that there was absolutely no pressure because nobody knew what this was. There was Les Mills RPM at the gym. There was a class for outdoor athletes on CompuTrainers, but nobody knew what this was yet. This was 2014. Singapore now has 18 indoor cycling studios.
Wow.
18 individual indoor cycling studios.
Wow.
Right. And so this was not that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I just kind of went with it because I felt like, I'm going to do my best, but I might be really bad at this. And it was trial by fire. It was an amazing opportunity. And it basically changed everything because it led to so much more work doing similar projects for similar kinds of clients and similar brands that decided once they saw it in Hong Kong and in Singapore, oh, I want to bring this to Manila, Jakarta, KL, Bangkok, Shanghai.
Yeah.
And it just started happening in Southeast Asia.
Wow.
And that was a very long answer to your question, but that's how it happened.
Your story is so amazing. And for people who don't know, I don't even remember how we found, I do know how we found each other. Very, very, very random. Some girl that I had overlapped with at a very small company knew you somehow. And then I think you found me through her Instagram or something like
that. It might have even been Clubhouse. Like
I didn't even do Forever Friday consulting yet. Like it was like really, 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 it was a very long time ago. It was Alex. Somehow we were connected through Alex, and I don't even know how. Yes. But anyway, we had met up in California recently, like last year, I think. And I remember you telling me this whole story, and I was just like mouth on the absolute floor. But it's the coolest story. And I'm so excited to dive in. You said so many things that I am just like furiously taking notes. So what I actually want to start with is this, when you worked for Jean-Georges, because you said everything is hospitality, which everybody listening by this point, unless this is your first time listening to the show, you guys know like hospitality and relationship building and like authentically seeing people, I think is the most important thing we can do on the planet. Like, I think that's why we're here, is like for relationships and to make people feel the best that they can feel. What did you learn from Jean-Georges about hospitality? So like not yet being in the fitness industry, where did you sort of start to perk your ears up and be like, oh, this is an interesting concept? Or, what observations did you have?
So the way that the corporate office was structured back then is you had, the wine purchasing in one department, you had PR in another, you had international expansion in another, recipe development over here, operations over there. And my technical job, and this is, entry level out of college, right? My technical job was to be the administrative assistant to the director of operations. And that's basically, this was right around the time that the devil eats Prada, or what was it? The devil wears Prada.
Yeah.
I just totally ruined my own joke. I was going to say like, this is like the devil wears Prada, where I could have probably written about the experience, the devil eats foie gras. Like, it was a very strange experience, but I was sort of the Jill of all trades in the office, very entry level. Whoever needed something done, they came to me and I went and did it for them, that sort of thing. And I think really to answer the question about what it was specifically, it was really seeing the steps of service and seeing where everybody had their own lane, but everyone was reading the reports that were faxed in from all of the international locations of who the VIPs were that ate at, what the feedback was. This is what went really well with such and such special. This is what didn't go well. We're doing this instead, because the whole team wanted touch points of what was happening when they couldn't actually be on site in Las Vegas or the Bahamas or Paris. Yeah. So that was interesting. And then also the steps of service. You dine upstairs at Mercer Kitchen or downstairs at Mercer Kitchen, and you have a very specific step of service. Same would be at JoJo. Nougatine or Jean-Georges, the 4-star, would be a slightly different vibe, but everything sort of centered on the structure and the operating procedure of how hospitality was meant to feel at a Jean-Georges establishment, whether it's from on a granular level of his warm Valrhona chocolate cake. I got to have when I lived in Jakarta a couple of years ago, which was amazing to be able to have that recipe, at another one of his locations somewhere else. But those touch points of menu, but also of operating procedure. And that is what helped me with working with my boutique fitness clients of reimagining what operating procedure is going to be. Because if you don't have, whether it's a video manual or a manual of side work or some kind of policy and procedure of how your business runs forward facing, and you learn this at Lululemon, right? Yep. You have to have that structure so that the experience is replicable and warm and goes back to the ethos of what your brand is and what you stand for. And that was really my first taste of it out of college. Was seeing very clearly defined pillars of hospitality. and who they wanted to hire. Like I was involved at Jean-Georges when they were opening Spice Market, which was the big deal in the meatpacking district.
Yep.
And the people that they recruited were from Danny Meyer's establishments, were from Danielle Belod's establishment, were from Be Our Guest, or maybe they worked outside of the city, but in, a similar like Stonehill. What is it? The one upstate, Blue Ridge at Stone
Blue Hill or oh no.
You know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. And I always forget the name of that place. Blue Hill, Blue Stone on the Farm. I don't know. Some Blue
somebody
Hill
DM
Farm.
us to
Is it Blue Hill Farm?
Something like that. But where hospitality is very much at the forefront. So those were the folks that they wanted to hire for all of the positions.
Yeah.
Right.
So you said something really interesting of the pillars, right? And the pillars of a brand. And I really want to dive into how these operating procedures make an experience worth going to, right? But I also and perhaps this is maybe like the same answer, but Lululemon, we did a great job of our core values of the brand carrying over into every single department. And this is why focusing on core values is such an important thing for me, whether it's with clients or members, or it's an entire module in my course. Like, you must understand what your core values are and how you want to make people feel. And I always say, like, write down those 5 things on a Post-it note and have them everywhere. And you brought up something really interesting with hiring, right? So a lot of people think like core values are this like fluffy thing that they don't really need. But when I look at the way we did it at Lululemon, it was like honesty, personal responsibility. Like there were some that were just so clear and so unavoidable that you very much understood, okay, cool. Does this person exemplify personal responsibility? Yes or no? Like you could take that into hiring and you could take it into every single situation. So core values are not just this fun, fluffy branding, colors and like pink flowers. And that's not what it is. So can you go a little bit into core values and how you've seen that sort of just like trickle into all areas of a business and how it affects the longevity of a business?
So back in 2018, I started Boutique Fitness Talks, which really started out of a necessity of the fact that I don't know everything, the fact that I don't have every answer. And I found myself on these intro calls for potential consulting boutique studio opportunities from all corners of the world. And so many of the questions were the same. And I thought, it would be a lot more efficient for us to realize that the world is a lot smaller than we thought, and to see that the problems that Manila is facing are probably the same as the problems that Munich are facing. Yeah. So in putting people in a room together, very not pay to play, limited sponsorship, very authentic small groups, we started having these discussions about core values and defining them, and various conversations about mergers and acquisitions and how do you do this and bliggity blah. And the thing that I thought was the most interesting, one of the things I should say, because they're always very interesting, but one of the most intriguing moments of a Boutique Fitness Talks was I had a studio owner talk about an instructor who is one of their lead instructors, one of their big money, big revenue making humans. But they were not quite on brand for what the ethos was of the company. And what did we think? And so, of course, somebody else, with a bar studio, not even cycling, had said, well, have you considered A, B, and C? What happened in their onboarding? What happened in their hiring? And this, people drop their egos at these events. You sign an NDA, nobody is on Instagram stories. Like what happens in the container stays in the container, right? Yeah. So this owner really swallowed their pride and their ego and said, I didn't do that properly. They were one of my first hires. Yeah. I've seen this person keep going rogue over the years and I'm not addressing it. Yeah. And I don't even remember who it was because I sit back and let people talk. Like it's not the Noel show. It is very much about the people in the room. And somebody just finally said, if you don't do that better, if you don't tighten up what you are about and have your ethos at every interview, then the ship is going to sink.
Yep.
And I can't agree with that more. And this person ended up going off, ended up quitting and ended up opening their own studio like 5 minutes away, which is kind of horrible, but hilarious. And also just unfortunately the sign of the times.
Yeah.
But, if we had a time machine to go back and do things differently, I know within 5 minutes of talking to somebody and watching them ride and watching them, how they hear the music and can do that or not do that on the beat, on the bike, I know right away whether they're going to be for the company or not. And every time I've thought that maybe somebody wasn't doing it for the reasons as dictated by, I don't want to say the right reasons, because there's always different reasons, right? And what might be right for one studio is not right for another. So when I see that the person that I'm being told, I really want this person in training, I really want to hire them, and I'm not seeing what the founder is seeing, I always try my best to go back to, okay, well, do they embody these 5 things? Are they going to be delivering the experience that you want for your clients? Yeah. Yes or no? Because I will always give you a chance if I'm on the border of thinking, maybe you're not going to be for us, right? But it really ultimately goes back to the one signing the checks, the founder. Yeah. If you feel strongly because you've done your homework and you have defined what you are about, if you feel that person is going to embody that, then let's give them a shot. Yeah. But if you don't do that from the beginning, and I don't care what kind of studio it is, it could be Cycle, it could be TRX, it could be anything. Yeah. It's going to bite you in the butt later. Yeah.
And I want to address this because I think a lot of people who are listening might be thinking, well, I'm not big enough to go through to define my core values, right? Like a lot of people think that's one of those things that comes later. It comes once you've gotten to a certain point. And that's where I think it's really, really important to make sure you do from the absolute very beginning. So let's say, and I know what you just described with that studio owner who was like, okay, I can see my error. I can see that I didn't do this from the beginning. I know for a fact there are a lot of people listening that are going through that same thing. I've had these conversations with studio owners, even just over the last few months of like, I've gotten this question a lot of, so-and-so's energy is not great. What can I do? Right. And so you're backtracking because you've already hired this person. So how would you recommend to a studio owner, let's say a small studio, let's say a Pilates studio in Louisville, Kentucky, 6 reformers, like let's say small, right? But how would you recommend they not backtrack, but start moving forward with core values in mind? How do you recommend that they start saying, okay, guys, hey, here are your expectations. This is our operating procedure going forward. Like, what would that look like?
That would look like the beginning of a manual, whether it's a actual, here's our curriculum, here's how you get from beginning, middle to end, or a front desk, here is the order that we find works best with how you handle X responsibilities. And here's your, dry erase pen, like we're working at a coffee shop or bar, check off your side work as you finish. It goes in your manual. It goes in your social media. It goes in your LinkedIn ad, your IG post, hey, we're looking for people. And it's one of the first things out of your mouth to folks when you are interviewing them. And just read how they react. I find that it's a lot easier, and I put a little asterisk next to easier. Nothing's easy. It's a lot easier to hire somebody that you build up from scratch within your ethos than it is to have them come to you from a big box gym, for example. And how you are putting out, this is who we are. This is what we stand for. This is us. Do you see yourself with us? I think people forget to, it doesn't matter what kind of industry it is, interviewing processes are a two-way street. They are interviewing you just like you are interviewing them to see if it's a mutual fit. Yeah. I would say is, and these values are going to keep evolving over time, right? It's funny. Yes. I just worked with a wonderful small studio in New York. And one of the first things I noticed when I visited was there were 5 panels in their hallway in between their 2 group fitness spaces that had their branding on them, on there, very cleanly, very beautifully done. And each had a word on it. And when I brought up the core values of the company and I said, oh, well, they are such and such, such and such and such, right? And she went, what? I said, those are the words in your hallway. Oh, like, babe, it's just because you're in it every single day. Like you forget what it is. Sometimes it takes the outside expert coming in to point out all the wonderful things you're doing. Right. Yeah. So I told her just recently, and you said this earlier, I had a good chuckle to myself. I told her, you need to put this on a Post-it note, put it on your bathroom mirror. And when you are up at 4:30 in the morning, not wanting to teach your class that's sold out with a wait list, just take a look and go, oh, that's why I'm doing this. Okay, great.
Yep. And so for everyone who's listening, I do, the monthly marketing must do's. And I love how just synergistic this is that we're having this conversation, because I had talked about core values and how important it is. And I want to just like stay on this because I think it's amazing. But if you're listening and you have no idea what we're even talking about, right? And you're like, core values, it sounds so stuffy or whatever. I have this like worksheet. It's in my blog. I'm just going to read it. Right. So some of the words that you could be thinking, like, this is what we're saying of, you put these words down on your Post-it and you have them. They could be things like adventurous, bold, caring, charming, like anything like that. Dedicated, diligent, ethical, exclusive. Like, what is the feeling that you want people to feel from working with you? And that is something, and how you want to lead. Right. So like freedom, like time freedom and flexibility is a huge core value for me. That's something that, like, as soon as I started my business, I was like, time, freedom, and flexibility is the driver for me. Like, I need to be able to figure out my schedule and do what I want to do. And it's just important to me. So like, that's a core value that's not going to go anywhere. Right. So it's just how you want to lead your company, how you want people to feel about you. And those are sort of like your driving things. But I don't know, do you have anything to add? I just wanted to like clarify.
Yeah, absolutely.
No one knew what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So one of the words on the wall is empowered. And so when I reminded her, these actually are your core values. If you just want to build out a sentence and a intention around those words, one example could be, I'm like, and take this if you want it. It's fine. Right. We strive to empower our community from the moment they book to the moment they leave. It could be something like that, because you're describing a feeling of what it is. And then
their whole journey.
Yeah, exactly. It ties in when they literally have to walk by these 5 panels on their way to the cycling room, on their way to the locker room, on their way to the toilet, on their way to the TRX. So it really is not this whipped cream thing. It's definitely not as scary as we think. And everyone should have, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, okay, let's talk a little bit about what makes a fitness class worth attending. Like, what is it that, yes, there's core values, and yes, there's this, I can't even describe the energy of working out with people. To me, is unlike anything else. Like, I can't work out by myself. I truly, literally cannot do it. I don't know why. I need other people around me to work out and to feel inspired and connected and like excited and happy, right? Like, group fitness makes me feel so freaking happy, but group fitness, like regular fitness, doesn't make me feel that way, or solo fitness does not make me feel that way. So can you answer why that happens for me, but also like what it is that makes an amazing class worth attending and worth feeling like just totally happy when it's done?
I can tell you what it isn't. Okay. And it's not somebody that tells you to spend $10,000 on a chandelier.
No.
Instead of $10,000 into the development of your team. So that's a hard pass for me. I feel that what makes it worth the time and the money is the authentic drive and personality and programming style of the instructor. We're in a business with boutique fitness that's all product driven, and people are our products. That's it.
Yep.
So if we are spending too much time worrying about which toilet to buy or how we want the flooring to look when people are going to be on it barefoot or in cleated cycling shoes, and we need to be sure they don't slip and fall.
Yeah.
There's certainly hardware elements there, but really the reason why people come isn't because you have a beautiful toilet. It's because they have a feeling of magnetism with your instructor. They want to be there at 7:30 in the morning on a Sunday.
Yep.
They want to be in the room because it cannot be explained. It cannot be replicated the way that it has been on their devices at home and in their home equipment. You have to be there or it didn't happen. It's that FOMO. It's what are they going to play? What are they going to say? How am I going to feel when I leave? Am I going to crush my personal best? What story are they going to tell me? Am I going to see my buddy there?
Yeah.
That makes an experience not worth missing.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the community, it's the connection. Yeah.
Yes.
And the self-motive and the motivation too of like, how did I do last time? How can I do this time?
And I mean, I go back to when I was a starving artist in New York City as boutique fitness was coming up. And before I made my pivot into, taking the SoulCycle training in 2011, auditioning in, I should say, and doing the SoulCycle training in 2011, if I didn't cancel my class by 5:00 the night before, I was out that money.
Yeah.
So it's also the accountability of, I made a commitment financially to show up, and I scheduled it onto my calendar. I got to be there. Yeah. I'm just going to have a coffee and something for breakfast, and I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah.
So we don't have that same accountability necessarily. And some would argue that we do with the way that Peloton is gamified, and they've done a really great job of creating a community virtually. Yeah. No shade there, but that doesn't resonate with everybody. So in person,
it's so funny you're saying that. It is. I really admire what they've done with their community is strong. Like there is absolutely no denying that. I'm in those Facebook groups. Like my sister goes on her Peloton every single day. But that's also in Santa Barbara where boutique fitness is not quite as prevalent. So there is the necessity factor. So for people who are missing boutique fitness, I totally get that. And very, very luckily I'm in New York where that's not, not missing any options for boutique fitness, but it is just still the human interaction. That is just what drives me and what gets me there.
Using your name positively on a microphone when you've done something well.
Yeah.
Handwritten notes.
Yeah. Positively. Yes. And that's interesting because I've talked to a few of my favorite instructors. And we've talked about how they've never said anything negative about bodies or any. There is honestly, unless it's like a very easy tweak of, roll your shoulders back, unless it's an actual something that is going to help you, a cue, there is no conversation ever in some of these studios of
how wonderful,
do it for the stuffing or whatever. That doesn't happen. So that I think is something also really interesting that definitely keeps me going back. Positive conversations are a huge thing for me. Not using negative verbiage ever, I think is really important unless, you really absolutely need to, just because there's such a ripple effect with our words that I think a lot of us even subconsciously don't totally understand sometimes. So the language of like you said, calling someone out when they do something positively, is fantastic and so smart.
Absolutely. That's a big part of my trainings too, or when I'm building a program or coming into a program that's already been established and refining it that is definitely one of my benchmarks of, are we leading with a positive or is it negative? And that's a big one for me because we don't realize how much we absorb. And instructors are leaders, they want to know what we're eating, what we're wearing, what we're listening to. We are leaders in the space, and the words that we choose deeply, deeply resonate and deeply matter. And the words and how we speak them, not what we say, but how we're saying it are a change between good and great. I mean, I have a whole course on that, but that's the difference between good and great is the delivery.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just having conversation. Like, you're so right. I'm just thinking, you're saying like nutrition, and people care about like what you're wearing and all these sort of things. Like, the language that we use is just so easy to tweak too. Like, you can say something along the lines of like, how are you talking about your meals from a place of addition as opposed to a place of restriction? Like, all these little changes that we make really do have such an impact, and they are absorbed. So that's just something I would recommend people, just to leave with, is like, how are we communicating in a way that is with positive language instead of negative?
And we weren't even having these conversations in the mainstream even a few years ago.
Yeah.
We really stop and think about it.
Yeah.
So go intuitive eating, go all of these programs of body neutrality. Fantastic.
Yeah.
I love it.
We are down to the wire. We have like 40 seconds left. This was so amazing. I am so happy that we did this. Where can everybody find you, Noel? I'm sure they're going to need so much more information from you about core values and things we didn't even touch on yet, but we will definitely do a part 2. But where can everybody find you?
So you can find me via my website or Instagram, which is Noel Cycles, and I'll have some fun things for people to read or download or listen to. If you're looking for support as a studio owner and want to come to an event where you're aligned with folks that want to see you succeed, you can take a look at boutiquefitnesstalks.com. And then my course that I co-founded on development of the voice, both with health and performance, is pepforfitpros.com, or on social media, pepforfitpros.
Amazing. I'll put all of that in the show notes.
Thank you.
Noel, thank you so much for doing this. You're such an amazing person.
Thank you for having me.
I love talking to you. I could talk to you for hours and hours.
Likewise.
All right, guys, you made it to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for being here. It means the world to me. If you haven't left a review yet, I would be so, so grateful. I read every single one, and they help me, they help the podcast, they help my visibility. So definitely encourage you to do that. And if the content of the episode was relevant to you, if it helped you with your business, I would love it if you shared it to your stories or if you sent it to a friend. That is it. I will see you next week. And again, thank you so much for being here.